There are days when life seems to play with us in a dangerous way, right? Like a game between the forbidden and the irresistible, messing with our most secret desires and testing how far we can go. It seems that even the most ordinary days can hold surprises. It was just a random Saturday. I was at home, distracted, folding some clothes for donation, and listening to that playlist that always calms me down. Everything was fine, until out of nowhere, the day started to get interesting. Between one piece and another, I found something I hadn't seen in a long time. My old black miniskirt. Yes, the same one that already caused looks and turned heads. I decided to try it, just to remember what it was like to feel in control, you know? That feeling of power that only a piece like this can give. I looked in the mirror and smiled. It's funny how an outfit can bring back such vivid memories. It wasn't just a skirt. It was a piece of who I was, and for a moment, who I could still be. But honestly, I had no idea that this simple decision would trigger something so different. Something that, until then, only existed in imagination. Shortly after, I heard a knock on the door. Still wearing the skirt, I opened it without thinking much. On the other side was Jason, my 22-year-old nephew. He came to fix a tap I had mentioned a few days ago. Jason is one of those guys who has an easy smile, a natural charm, you know? And at that moment, it seemed like the air between us became thicker. When he saw me, he held his gaze for a second longer. You know that kind of look that seems to pass through you? A look that makes you question whether you're reading too much into the situation, or whether there's actually something there. It was hard to ignore. "So, Auntie, where is the problematic tap?" he asked in that carefree way. But there was something in his voice, something that wasn't there before, a more playful, almost challenging tone. I pointed to the bathroom, trying to pretend everything was normal, but my heart was racing. Because, well, his look wasn't innocent at all. And the most disturbing thing? Neither does mine. Jason went to the bathroom, but I could feel his eyes on my back as he walked, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't divert his attention. The tension in the air was palpable, the kind of tension you feel on your skin. When he passed me, his gaze felt like a touch. You know that feeling that sends shivers down your spine and makes your heart beat faster? That was it. A mix of tension and curiosity that I didn't know where it came from. I went back to the living room, trying to distract myself with the clothes. But honestly, my thoughts were on him. That look, it wasn't in my head, and I knew it when he came back from the bathroom to get a tool. He stopped, looked again, and this time it was impossible to ignore. His eyes slowly descended, as if exploring every detail. It was a look that made me feel exposed. Not only that, it made me feel alive. "That skirt makes you look amazing. You still have the same glow as before," he said. His voice was low, firm, full of a confidence I had never seen. In him, as if he knew exactly what he was doing, as if he had planned this. My face instantly heated up. I tried to laugh, but even my laugh felt nervous, fragile. "Thank you," I murmured, looking away, but I couldn't hide how much it affected me. When he left the room, I stood there, processing everything. How can someone I've known for so long suddenly mess with me like this? It was as if the air around us had changed, charged with something I couldn't name. And honestly, I didn't know if I wanted to run away from it or dive in head first. Jason went back into the bathroom, and I tried to focus on what I was doing, but it was impossible. His words echoed in my mind. "That skirt makes you look amazing." It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. So safe, so natural. This was driving me crazy. Minutes later, he called me. "Auntie, can you come here for a moment? I need help with something." My heart skipped a beat. I sighed, trying to compose myself, and went to the bathroom. But inside, I knew it wasn't just the faucet that was about to leak. When I walked in, he was kneeling next to the sink. The grease-stained hands, the messy hair, and that look. He looked up, and it was as if time stopped for an instant. Our eyes met, and there was something there, something intense, something no one could ignore. "Will you hold this for me?" He handed me a screwdriver, and when I leaned over to help, I realized we were close, very close. The space seemed too small for what was happening between us. My heart was racing, and I tried with all my might to appear indifferent. But he knew exactly what he was doing to me. "You look different today, you know," he said, with a smile that mixed charm and defiance. "I don't know. Maybe it's the skirt, or maybe it's you." His voice had that tone that makes your mind spin, pulling you into thoughts you try to avoid. But at that moment, my body seemed to be in a different tune. I took a step back, trying to create some distance. "Jason, are you done there?" My voice came out lower and shakier than I wanted. He laughed, a laugh that carried something more. "Almost. Just one more minute. It's not going away yet." It was as if he wanted to prolong that moment, stretch the tension in the air just to see how far it would go. After a while in the bathroom, he returned to the living room. He was wiping his hands with a cloth, but his eyes, they were on me, as if he was waiting for the right moment, or mustering up the courage to do something I didn't even want to imagine. "Ready. I don't think the tap will bother you anymore," he said. But the tone? It was loaded with something more. It was almost as if he was testing the waters, trying to feel my reaction before taking the next step. I thanked him, pretending I didn't feel the weight of his gaze. But he took a step forward, and that's when everything started to change. "You know, there's something I've wanted to say for a while," he began. My heart raced instantly. He didn't seem hesitant. He seemed determined, and that left me floored. "I know it might sound weird, but you make me think about things I shouldn't," he continued. Those words hit me like a shock. It was direct, intense, and at the same time, impossible to ignore. "Jason, what are you trying to say?" My voice was almost a whisper, as if I was afraid of the answer. But he didn't back down. He took a deep breath, took another step, and said bluntly, "I think I have feelings for you. Something that isn't just familiar. It's much stronger than that." I froze. It was as if my body was torn between two reactions. A part of me wanted to stop it right there, say it was crazy, but the other didn't want him to stop talking, because the way he said it, it was impossible not to feel something. Jason lowered his head for a moment, as if he regretted speaking, but then looked back at me. I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it. The intensity in his eyes was almost palpable. He wasn't just confessing something, he was daring me to feel the same way. I tried to look firm. "Jason, this is complicated. We are family." The words came out, but even as I said them, I knew they sounded fragile. He nodded, but the way he looked at me made it clear he wasn't going to give up that easily. And in that moment, something changed. Because I knew that from now on, nothing would be the same as before. After that confession, the air between us became thick, so dense that it was difficult to even breathe. Jason was still standing there, staring at me, as if he was expecting a different answer than the one I had given. I tried to act naturally, grabbing some clothes, but my hands were shaking, and I knew he understood. I shouldn't have said anything, right? He broke the silence, but his tone didn't sound regretful. In fact, it looked like he was playing, testing the limits, poking at something I was desperate to ignore. "Jason, do you understand that this is complicated? We are family, and that will never change." My voice sounded firmer than I felt, but he took a step forward. He approached. It cut the distance between us. "I know that. I saw it in your eyes." He said it with such conviction that my heart skipped a beat. Had I let on? Was he right? "Jason, this has to stop now," I tried to say with more emphasis. But he didn't back down. On the contrary, he seemed even more sure of what he wanted. "I can't pretend I don't feel anything. You are different." It always was. I took a step back, trying to create some space between us, but he wouldn't move. It was too close. His presence was almost suffocating. "Look, I need you to leave. We both need time to think," I said, trying to maintain my composure. He hesitated. He stood there as if calculating his next moves. But finally he took a step back. "Okay, but it doesn't end here. I won't give up on you," he said. The determination in his voice was impossible to ignore. He took his things and left, but left something in the air, something that accompanied me the rest of the day, and until the night. When he closed the door, I threw myself on the couch, trying to process everything. Jason was crossing a dangerous line, and I knew I needed to find a way to deal with it. But deep down, the question was, did I really want him to stop? The following days were torment. He kept sending messages, and I forced myself not to respond. I didn't want to feed anything, but at the same time, I couldn't get everything that had happened out of my head. His words, the way he looked at me, it was as if it had been engraved in my mind. That night, the doorbell rang. Before I even opened the door, I knew who it was. My heart was already racing. When I opened it, Jason was there, hands in pockets, intense gaze. But there was something different about him, something firmer. more determined. "I need to talk to you," he said, before I could even think about refusing. And for a moment, I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I let him in, but stayed at a distance that felt safe, at least physically. "Jason, I thought I was clear. This can't go on," I began, trying to sound firm, but he didn't let me finish. "I know what you said, but I also know what I feel," he replied, his voice firm, almost challenging, as he took slow steps towards me. His gaze was fixed on me, and each step seemed to add weight to the air. "Don't you understand? I've never felt this way about anyone before, and I know it's wrong, but I can't just ignore it," he confessed, his voice full of emotion, almost shaking. That disarmed me, because even though I didn't want to admit it, his every word touched me. "Jason, this needs to stop. We are family. As much as you feel it, some things just can't happen," I said, trying to sound firm, but my own voice sounded uncertain. He paused for a moment, as if my words had hit him like a blow. "If that's what you want, I'll leave," he said, with a sadness that seemed to drip from every word. For a moment, I saw the pain in his eyes and felt my heart sink, but I knew I needed to be strong, not for me, but for both of us. When he closed the door and left, the house fell into a deafening silence. I sat on the couch, staring into space, trying to organize the thoughts that came like a flood: guilt, curiosity, and to my surprise, a pang of longing. Something about his intensity kept echoing in my mind, like a song you can't get out of. Your head. I relived every word, every look, the way he saw me. So different, so unique. One sentence of his never left my mind. "You are special to me in a way that no one else is." As much as I wanted to ignore it, it resonated deeply. Maybe it was the way he spoke, with so much conviction, that made everything seem so real. Over. The next few days, I immersed myself in work, trying to distract myself, but Jason was still there, like a constant presence in my mind. His messages arrived every now and then, short, but full of emotion. He was fighting something bigger than himself, and it broke my heart. But I knew I needed to be firm. I needed to put an end to it. I took a deep breath and finally responded, "Jason, I need you to stop. We can't continue with this, no matter how difficult it is. It's better for both of us." Each word felt like it weighed a ton, and sending that message felt like ripping a piece out of me. His response came almost immediately. "If that's what you want, I'll respect it. But it doesn't change how I feel." Reading that broke me, because deep down, I knew he was sincere. And perhaps it was exactly this sincerity that made everything so difficult to ignore. I thought it was over, that things were finally back to normal. But a week later, Jason showed up at my door, without warning, without hesitating. He was holding an envelope in his hand, and the nervousness on his face was evident. "I wrote this because I can no longer hold back what I feel. Please read it," he said, holding out the envelope to me. And at that moment, I realized that for him, this was far from over. I took the envelope hesitantly. Jason turned and walked away before I could react, leaving a heavy silence behind him. I sat on the sofa with my heart racing and, with trembling fingers, I opened the letter. With each line, it felt like he was there, talking directly to me. It was so intimate, so real. Jason confessed everything. He told how, little by little, his feelings changed, how he fought against what he felt, but couldn't win. Every word seemed to echo in my mind, but it was the final sentence that completely disarmed me. "I know this is wrong, but I can't get you out of my heart." I closed the letter, but it was as if his words were engraved on my skin. Feelings that I had been burying began to emerge. It was as if he had found an opening, a way to reach me even from a distance. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore it. For days, I reread those words, wondering how something so wrong could feel so right. It was a dilemma that consumed me, because deep down, I knew it affected me more than I was willing to admit. A few days later, he started messaging me again. Jason said he needed to see me, that he needed to talk to me face to face. I ignored it, tried to keep a safe distance, but my heart, I was divided. On the outside, I looked strong. Inside, everything was chaos. Jason, however, wouldn't give up. He started to appear, first, in front of my work, waiting, watching me with that intensity that seemed to pierce my soul. Every time I saw him, I felt the ground disappear a little. More, I knew this was getting out of control. and fast. After so many messages and unexpected appearances, he finally got what he wanted. One last conversation. He waited for me when I left work, leaning against my car, his arms crossed and that look that I couldn't decipher. Determination mixed with vulnerability. My heart accelerated at the same time. "Please just listen to me," he said before I could walk past. "Jason, this has crossed all limits. I don't know how to deal with this anymore," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. But he stepped forward, invading my space, and the air around us seemed to stop. "I know you're trying to push me away, but I see how you look at me. You feel something too, and I know it," he said, his voice low but full of certainty. Each word hit me like a wave, leaving me breathless. He knew exactly where to play. I took a deep breath, trying to find strength. "Jason, this is more than complicated. It's impossible. We are family. No matter how you feel, we can't cross that line." My voice sounded firm, but inside, I was breaking. He lowered his head, as if absorbing every word. I thought he was going to back off, but he surprised me. He held my hand lightly, his fingertips brushing mine, and the warmth of his touch made me shiver. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me. And even if it never happens, I won't forget how I feel." That last sentence hung in the air, like a confession that had no return. My heart was racing. My mind was in conflict. And in that moment, I realized that what Jason felt was stronger than I imagined. But that only made everything even more dangerous. My heart felt so heavy I could barely breathe. I pulled my hand away gently, trying to maintain my composure, and looked at him steadily. "Jason, you need to move on. It's the best for both of us. You deserve someone who can give you what you're looking for. But that person isn't me." He stood still, as if my words were a punch to the chest. His eyes were a mixture of sadness and acceptance. And for a moment I thought he was going to insist, but then he took a step back, murmuring, "I'll try, for you." When he turned and started to walk away, I knew it was the end. Silence once again filled the house, but this time it was different. It was no longer suffocating, full of tension. It was lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted. I knew that chapter was closed, even if the pain was still there. It wasn't easy, but we had done what was right. I spent the next few days reflecting. Jason marked me in a way I didn't expect. He had the courage to be vulnerable, to open his heart even though he knew he could be rejected. This requires a strength that few have, and as complicated as it was, I respected that about him. Jason taught me something important, that facing your feelings, even the most forbidden ones, is a demonstration of courage. But on the other hand, I learned that love is not always enough. Some barriers cannot be crossed, and some paths simply cannot be followed. This situation showed me that love also means knowing how to say no, set limits, even when it hurts. Because sometimes that's what it means to care for someone. That's what I did for him, and that's what I did for myself. The days that followed were a mixture of relief and reflection. Jason left an impact that I will never forget, because he showed me that right and wrong are not always easy to follow, and that, sometimes, the most difficult choice is the only one that leads us to peace. Life is like that, full of moments when we are put to the test. Moments when the heart wants one thing, but reason screams another. These moments define us. They force us to grow. And although I didn't choose the easy path, I chose the right path. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. If you've ever been through something like this, you know what it's like. Being honest with yourself and others can be the biggest challenge of all, but that's what matters. Because at the end of the day, it's these difficult decisions that shape who we truly are. Jason is gone, but he left more than memories. He left a lesson. And as complicated as everything was, I knew that somehow we would both come out stronger. Because sometimes love is letting go, even if it means carrying a scar on your heart.